Hello everybody and welcome to Mr. Stansfield's Education Videos. Today we're going to be taking a look at how to take a landscape and make it a more dramatic black and white landscape inspired by Ansel Adams. So I have a picture here that I took on my phone, and it's just a picture of the beach. This is unedited from the phone. And there's a couple of strategies that I'm going to talk about, ways to get a more dramatic landscape photo. So the first thing I'm going to recommend is that you have a blue sky in your photo. And that makes this next step go really quite well. So I'm going to go Image, Adjustments, Black and White. Now, of course, if I'm doing any kind of editing, I might go to my layers here and copy the background layer. I can do that by selecting the background layer and using the shortcut key Command J. That's going to be layer 1, and I'm just going to call this the edit layer because basically I want to keep the background available if I ever want to undo something. But you could also do each of these edits in a layer, and maybe we'll talk about that later. But let's keep it simple for now. Image, Adjustments, Black and White. Now, Ansel Adams always used a yellow or a red filter over his lens if he was shooting any kind of sky with blue in it. So if we go here to yellow filter or red filter, you can see that what happens is that the blue part of the sky becomes darker in the black and white conversion. You can also do a high contrast red filter, which is going to make the sky the darkest. So here's before and after. Here's the default black and white versus the high contrast red filter. You can see it introduces a lot of contrast to the sky, especially if I have clouds. This is probably a good step. So I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, that's the first step, is to convert to black and white and think about using a red, yellow, or high contrast red filter. Now there's some quite a bit of contrast in this picture to begin with. But let's talk about using the dodging and burning tools. We know that Ansel Adams did a lot of dodging and burning in the darkroom when he was making his pictures. And in this case, Photoshop has adopted these strategies from working in the darkroom, dodging and burning. Dodging is going to make an area lighter, and burning will make an area darker. And once you have this tool selected, you have quite a few options. So in this case, dodging, up here, you're going to choose the range. So you can actually make your shadows lighter, midtones lighter, or highlights lighter. In this case, let's choose highlights. I have a big brush here. The shortcut key to get a smaller brush would be the left bracket key. If I click that on the keyboard, or the right bracket key will make that brush bigger. And then what I'm going to do is actually change my exposure here too. So if I dodge or burn with 100% exposure, it's going to really affect the picture by clicking and dragging there. I'm going to undo that by hitting Command Z. But really, oftentimes we want our exposure somewhere in the 1 to 20% range. We don't really want to do too much exposure using dodging and burning at a time. We kind of want to do it slowly. So I'm going to paint in, and you see here I have the range of the highlights selected, so it's only going to affect the brighter areas of the photo. And I'm looking for this part of the photo here. I want to brighten up my highlights. And then I might go and get the burning tool, and I'm going to go ahead and choose midtones or even shadows here. Bring my exposure down, like I said, between 1 and 20%, maybe 10, 15%. And then I'm going to paint in kind of in these shadow areas, just very slowly. Maybe change this to midtones because I want to darken the corner down here. And I want to do this evenly, and I want to do this in a way that isn't obvious. I don't want people to be able to see that I'm dodging and burning, and by reducing the exposure, that helps that. Let's make our shadows a little bit darker in the sky now. I can kind of just darken up the sky, and you can see it's just going to darken up the sky and leave the highlights alone because I have the shadows selected up here. So it's going to bring in the shadow area, and that's just going to be a really dramatic, a lot of contrast, which is really what Ansel Adams would be doing in the darkroom. Something like this, maybe. Go back to our dodging tool and bring out the highlights again. So really what we're doing is we're increasing the contrast. So that looks okay. That looks okay. Here's what else I might do to get the same effect. Right? This looks maybe a little bit too contrasty. And then also, if I look up here, at my shadow area, I'm trying to get a pointer here, but that works. This has blown out. We call that blown out, where highlights have no detail. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw away this edit layer, and I'm going to show you a different way that I could do this. So I'll copy the background layer again, rename it edit, And then I could have gone, so image adjustments, black and white, same beginning point. I'm going to go ahead and choose a high contrast red filter. But I could have just done an adjustment, image adjustment, and I could have done like a curves adjustment or a levels adjustment, maybe even a brightness and contrast adjustment. So I can increase the contrast overall. And hey, that looks actually quite a bit like it did using dodging and burning, right? Brightness, I can change the brightness, make it quite a bit darker. That's going to introduce a lot more drama. But we can see if I did something like this, the highlights are not quite as light as I want them to be in the foreground or in the ocean. The sky looks pretty good. But so here is the next step. So the next step, if I'm going to make an adjustment, I can do it in a layer, and I can use a layer mask. So in this case, I'm going to back up. I'm going to go into my history, and I'm going to find my history. Window history, if I can't find it. Oh, there it was. All right, window history. It was down here. So I can back up to the black and white, and then I can create a new adjustment layer. So the way that I'm going to do this is click on this little half circle, and I can go to that brightness and contrast, and I can do this in a layer. You can see it creates its own layer. Increase the contrast, decrease the brightness, and the sky looks really dramatic now, but the rest of it doesn't. So what I can do is actually get the brush tool, and I can paint with black and white with my layer mask over here. And I can create a nice big brush. Right bracket will get that bigger. I can hit D on the keyboard. That will default black and white foreground background color, and then X will switch. And basically, I just want to make sure that this color right here is black. I could also manually select it. And what I can do is actually paint back the foreground to what I want it to be. So right now, it's only affecting the sky. So this is a great way to kind of dodge and burn or only affect one area, is to do your adjustment here in a layer. So we call these layer adjustments. I could have also done levels or curves or exposure similarly. That would also work. Let me show you how I would take care of the contrast in the foreground now. So I'm going to go here, I'm going to grab curves, and I'm going to go ahead and grab the eyedropper tool. The eyedropper tool is over here. Click on the eyedropper tool. And I'm going to command click on the darkest part of the area that I want to increase the contrast, and then command click on the lightest. So in this case, I'm going to command click in this dark shadow right here, and then I'm going to command click maybe like up here. And what I'm going to do is on this curve, I'm going to take those points that I just made and make an S curve based on where those points are. And then you can see what I can do again is paint with the paintbrush the areas that I don't want to be affected. So it's only affecting the foreground when I paint with black. So black will essentially hide the effect of that layer, and then white will reveal it. So I've just done two different adjustments, one for the sky and one for the foreground or the ground. And those adjustments, one was brightness and contrast, the other was curves. But then I could use the brush, using a big brush in this case, on the layer mask, painting with black and white, to get the effect that I'm looking for. Now let's say I wanted to affect only one area of the photo. Let's say I wanted to affect only the area of the photo that is the sand in this picture. So what I'm going to do is let's get levels, just because we haven't used that before. And I'm going to I want my sand to be darker. So I'm just going to drag up this side until it looks how I want it to look. And maybe more contrast too. I'm not really worried about the rest of the photo. I'm really only interested in the sand right now. We want it dark and contrasty. All right, so that looks good. So what I'm going to do now is fill this with black. All right, and I can do that by going to Edit Fill, and then select black. And make sure that the layer mask is selected. Why didn't that work? Let's try again. Edit Fill, fill with black. Oh, that's because the opacity was set to 8. Make sure that the opacity is set to 100%. There we go. And so this is nothing's happening now. So then what I would do is select the foreground color as white. I could hit D on the keyboard, and that would set the foreground and background color. And then I can just paint in that area right there. And so this is really just affecting the foreground and making that foreground darker, if that's something I wanted to do. So you can also, if you wanted to get really specific, like let's say you wanted like a hard-edged building or something to change contrast or value. Well, what you can do is you can zoom in. Command-Option-0 will look at that at 100%. Get a small brush. I'm using the left bracket here to get a smaller brush. And then I'm just going to back up, fill with black, and then what I can do is I can paint along the edge there. So I can get exactly what I want and nothing else to be the color or the value that I'm looking for. So those are a couple of ways that I would think about adjusting locally. Command minus will zoom out, and I can just paint in here. These are a couple of ways that I can think that, we're affecting only certain areas of the photo. It's like dodging and burning, but maybe you have some more control. Once I save this, what I can do is, later I can say, well, that levels doesn't look very good, and I want to do it again. So I can throw that layer away and then redo it. I can always take these layers away. So here's the black and white, brightness and contrast for the sky, curves for the foreground, and then I can edit individual parts of the photo by using layer masks. And just a key about the layer mask, anything that's black will hide the effect of that layer, and anything that's white will reveal it. So oftentimes I'll do an adjustment and then fill it with black and then paint with white, or sometimes I'll actually paint with black over the areas that I want to hide the effect of that layer. So that's kind of quickly a number of ways that you can affect a picture and kind of create a dramatic landscape picture. The first would be converting to black and white. You can use filters when you convert to black and white. You can dodge and burn once you kind of make those edits. And when you dodge and burn, you can definitely choose whether you're dodging and burning highlights, midtones, shadows, as well as kind of the intensity of it by changing the exposure. And then you may want to use an adjustment layer. So you go down here to this little half circle, choose the adjustment that you want to do, and then you can use the layer mask to only affect a certain area. A lot of times this kind of landscape, editing will take 10, 20 minutes for one picture just to kind of fine tune exactly how much contrast and where that contrast is happening. And that's not unlike Ansel Adams would work in the darkroom. Sometimes he would work to make a print for hours and hours and hours, starting with the negative, the quote-unquote the negative, the bare picture, the unedited picture, even the unedited black and white picture, something like this. And then, he would go in and really think about the drama or the emotional content, how it felt. He thought a lot about how it felt to him when he was making the picture, and then also how it would feel to the viewer when they were looking at the picture. So when we look at Ansel Adams pictures, we know that they're edited. We know they're heavily edited, like we just went over. And so that's how I would start on trying to create a dramatic black and white landscape picture.